Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's update is one of the most significant in recent months. Belarus has just made a major announcement, and it has the potential to shift the entire course of the Russia-Ukraine war. This isn't just another political statement or military maneuver, it's a move that could dramatically alter alliances, strategies, and the overall balance of power in Eastern Europe. Let's break down what Belarus announced, why it matters, and what it could mean for Ukraine, Russia, NATO, and the rest of the world. To begin with, the announcement came from Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko in a nationally broadcast address that caught many observers off guard. In it, he declared that Belarus will no longer remain a passive observer in the conflict and is activating full regional defense coordination with Russia. This effectively means that Belarus is committing itself more directly to Moscow's war efforts, not just through rhetoric, but potentially through concrete military action and logistical support. While Belarus has been Russia's closest ally since the beginning of the invasion until now, it had not officially entered the war as an active participant. That may be changing. What's especially critical is the language Lukashenko used. He framed this decision as a response to what he called NATO aggression on our western borders, and claimed that Belarus faces direct threats from Poland and Lithuania. According to him, the West is preparing to destabilize Belarus and use it as a launchpad against Russia. This narrative mirrors the one often pushed by the Kremlin, portraying NATO and the West as the true aggressors and justifying military action as a form of preemptive defense. However, many analysts believe this is more than just political theater. Satellite imagery and intelligence reports have shown increased activity at Belarusian military bases, with Russian and Belarusian troops conducting new joint exercises near the Ukrainian border. There's also growing evidence that Belarus has begun transferring weapons, ammunition, and possibly drone systems to Russian forces operating in eastern Ukraine. Some even speculate that Belarus could allow Russian forces to launch a new offensive from its territory, something that would drastically open up a new northern front in the war. For Ukraine, this announcement is deeply concerning. Ukrainian intelligence has already raised alarms about renewed threats from the north. After the failed Russian assault on Kyiv in early 2022, the northern borders had quieted down. But a new incursion through Belarus could force Ukraine to stretch its defenses thin, possibly weakening its positions in the east and south, where the fighting has been most intense. Ukrainian officials have begun reinforcing border areas near Belarus and have issued public warnings to be prepared for any scenario, including missile strikes or even ground assaults from Belarusian soil. The bigger question is what Belarus is hoping to gain from this move. Lukashenko's regime has been heavily reliant on Russia since massive protests erupted in 2020 following a contested election. Putin's support was critical in keeping Lukashenko in power. In return, Belarus has allowed Russian troops to operate freely on its territory and has become increasingly integrated into Moscow's military and political strategies. By aligning more openly with Russia in the Ukraine conflict, Lukashenko may be seeking to guarantee his own survival, hoping that greater loyalty will earn him continued protection from the Kremlin. But this strategy is incredibly risky. Not only does it further isolate Belarus from the international community, but it also makes the country a legitimate target in the war. If Belarus becomes a launchpad for Russian attacks, Ukraine and potentially NATO could respond by targeting military assets within Belarus. This would mark a dangerous escalation, potentially drawing Belarus into full-scale conflict and bringing the war closer to NATO borders. In response to the announcement, NATO officials have issued strong statements condemning Belarus' alignment with Russia and warning against any actions that could widen the war. Several member states, including Poland and Lithuania, have begun reinforcing their own military positions near the Belarusian border. There are also discussions underway about increasing sanctions on the Lukashenko regime, targeting its defense sector and economic interests. The message from the West is clear. If Belarus crosses the line from support to active aggression, it will face consequences. Another angle to consider is how this affects Russia. With its military stretched thin across multiple fronts, and with mounting casualties and logistical problems, Moscow desperately needs more support. Belarus stepping up could help fill some of those gaps, whether it's by offering troops, launching offensives from the north, or providing weapons and supplies. It's unclear how far Belarus is willing to go, but even limited involvement could free up Russian resources for more aggressive actions elsewhere. On the Ukrainian side, the timing of this development is particularly sensitive. Ukraine is entering another critical phase of the war, with new counteroffensives planned for the winter. Military aid from Western allies continues to arrive, but any renewed threats from Belarus could delay operations and force a reevaluation of strategy. The Ukrainian government is urging international partners to put more pressure on Belarus, warning that ignoring this development could open a dangerous new chapter in the conflict. Inside Belarus, public opinion remains complex. Many Belarusians oppose the war and are against deeper involvement, but the Lukashenko regime has silenced dissent and cracked down on any opposition. In fact, some Belarusians have even joined volunteer units fighting for Ukraine, seeing Russia as an occupier and Lukashenko as a puppet. The risk of internal unrest within Belarus is real, especially if the country becomes a battlefield or suffers the consequences of expanded sanctions and military action. Economically, this move also comes at a cost for Belarus. Already under significant Western sanctions, further involvement in the war will likely tighten the noose. Exports are suffering, foreign investment has dried up, and the economy is being propped up largely by Russian subsidies. Aligning even closer with a struggling Russia could bring short-term political gains for Lukashenko, but in the long term, it could make Belarus even more dependent and vulnerable. One final aspect worth highlighting is how this affects the broader geopolitical picture. China, for example, has maintained a cautious stance throughout the war, calling for peace while avoiding direct confrontation with the West. Belarus' announcement could complicate China's balancing act if the war expands. Similarly, countries in the region like Moldova and Georgia are watching closely, aware that instability in Belarus could spill over or trigger shifts in Russian military focus. In summary, Belarus' big announcement is more than just symbolic. It signals a dangerous new phase in the war, where the lines between allies and active participants begin to blur. By committing itself more deeply to Russia's war effort, Belarus risks becoming the next major flashpoint in the conflict. For Ukraine, it means a new threat from the north. For Russia, it means another source of support in a grueling war. And for NATO and the West, it raises the stakes in what is already the most volatile conflict Europe has seen in decades. Thanks for watching and staying informed. Make sure to subscribe for continued coverage as this story develops, because the next moves in Belarus could change everything.